Hopefully no other press people have been killed in Gaza or in Mexico. Messengers are having a really hard time in the world at this period. And I'd mostly like to acknowledge, first of all, the beautiful planet we live on, this beautiful region we live on. I'd like to acknowledge the land we're on now. We're sitting in a place that was ancient cedar forest. There were trees here below this building not that long ago that were maybe 12, 14 feet in diameter. I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations, the Silts and the Sinaiks, who basically inhabited this territory. And once I get further into my presentation, I'll talk of some other First Nations. You're going to get information tonight that is, for some of you, going to change your life in a way that you might become much more aware of the place the moment and place you are at when you travel in the province. And this story came to me mostly in 2011, on March 11, 2011, when Fukushima, the tidal wave hit the coast at Fukushima. And the reason for that is that I've been quite involved in the fight to get a permanent moratorium on uranium in 1987, and did the demonstrations at Hanford, did a lot of meetings, was one of the founding members of the uranium group, which we're a regional group of people who were very concerned about the uranium thing. And so Fukushima was very scary for me, and it still is. And today there's one of the reactors that's still digging its way into the planet. And that whole thing could go at any moment. They have now, the Japanese government has permitted now the dumping of millions of gallons of safely, waters that have been used in the cooling system that are considered safe. And so when Fukushima happened, and I want you to listen to me in terms of how decisions are taken and why decisions are taken. And when Fukushima happened, there was of course a natural outcry to find out how is the contamination going to affect the fisheries on the West Coast, the seaweed, the mussels, all of what we eat from the ocean. And there was a lot of testing that was undertaken by the American and the Canadian government. And as things unfolded, they just shut it down. They just shut down the whole testing of the seaweeds, and the BC government, and I don't recall it was exactly at that moment, but the BC government had a radiation protection service. The guy that I dealt with over years through the radon gas question, which again, the radon gas question was raised in BC because of Grand Forks. That whole thing came from Grand Forks because we figured if people become aware of radon gas, they're going to become aware of uranium. They'll not want uranium. Lo and behold, there is no more radiation protection service in British Columbia. There is, I don't know where you go now for that kind of question. Anyway, so that kind of, it brings me to the story for me that starts here. And some of the issues that unfolded in Grand Forks have had an impact provincially. And what you're hearing tonight no one has raised this matter in the way in which I believe it should be raised. And you will become aware of that in the second part of my talk. But first one, and again, it's kind of, I want to address as I go along how we seem to bow down to people who tell us they're experts of this, they're doctors of this, they're doctors of that. And in my own life, I've kind of come to the place when I relate to people, I don't relate to their titles. I basically try my best to relate to the human who is in front of me and share at that level, because we're all equals. And some of us have had the opportunity to be exposed to information, education. And in my book, if you're one who's been blessed with such an opportunity, you owe it to the community who has given you that opportunity. You owe it to your community to serve. And that you come from one place on the planet and live in another, it's always that community. So first I want to take you, most of you have been to Princeton. So when you drive to Princeton, you come through town and you climb up that hill, you're going around you're basically going around the cliff. To get around the cliff, you climb up and then you dip down. And before you make this sharp turn and you go up that steep hill, when you're down in that dip, you look in front of you, there's a massive tailing pond. The man who engineered that tailing pond was Dr. Robert Seraphim. Now, Dr. Seraphim, I got to know him, I wouldn't say personally, but professionally, I would say. In 1985, there's a company called, Sumac Ventures, 24K Mining. Anyways, it came up, they showed up in town, and they were going to process old tailing ponds up at McFarland Creek, up the Burra. And Dr. Seraphim, he was basically saying, well, I'm the person who basically set up the plans for Copper Mountain Mine in Princeton. And that was his baby, that was his calling card. Well, in '85, we went through a waste management hearing, an environmental board hearing, and two other environmental board decisions that were taken without a hearing, but in our favor. And in the end, we had them stop. They could not go ahead because of the way they had set up their permit. We had proven in their permit that it was impossible to realize their dream. So they couldn't operate. So what they did, they went to the Minister of Mines, or Minister of the Environment at that moment was Mr. Bruce Strachan. Mr. Bruce Strachan just basically signed off on the permit, allowed to dump. That was 1980. By then it was beginning 86. By 1989, Les Molnar, a local person who was and he's still here in town, was the conservation officer, shows up on the mill site. They were right in the middle of a cyanide breach. They had a spill. They got shut down completely. It went to court. Seraphim was found guilty of mismanagement. I forget exactly what the charge was. He was found guilty, and then he fought it in the BC Court of Appeals, and the BC Court of Appeal person judged in his favor, because when they tested, the way they test for this pollution is they'll take the water from the creek where the spill happened, and then they'll put trout fry in that water, and if the fish survive 24 hours, it's good. If they die within 24 hours, they're toast. So they put the fry in the water, that they'd hauled water from Burrell Creek or McFarland Creek, and the fish died. So, and I was in court the day the lawyer presented this. He said, because they did not use fish from the Burrell Creek and they used fish from the Capilano because the testing was done in the Capilano, Dr. Seraphim was free. Nevertheless, so what happens now is that this same person masterminded this tailing pond. That tailing wall, you see, is 500 feet high. They're wanting to increase it to over 800 feet. And it's adjacent to the Similkameen River. And a couple of years ago, we're all aware how the Mount Pauli spill happened up around Quesnel. It was massive. It was like millions and millions of gallons of water, like in salmon-bearing streams. And so here we have a situation where when you look at that, you're looking at this wall. Well, when you look from the top, you're looking at I think they call it Smelter Lake, the same as the Smelter Lake we had in Grand Forks that blew up in 48. And if 45% of that dam blew, Princeton would be under 30 feet of water or of tailings, silt and toxins within minutes. And it's like if you go down to Similkameen, most of you are aware of the Nighthawk. When you're driving in from Costa and you're going towards the Soyuz, you see always the sign USA Nighthawk Crossing. Well, you drive down through there, you're going along the Similkameen. It's just beautiful country. It's all sagebrush. And at the bottom of it, above Oroville, there's a dam called I believe it's Henlow Falls. Well, Henlow Falls is going to be taken out. They're basically now looking at how to remove the dam, how they get the best way to remove the dam. And so the First Nations I was at a ceremony this spring at Henlow Falls, and they were just in the midst of the prayer calling back the salmon. And what happens? A big salmon jumps out of the water, boom, right? And so the salmon, once they take out that fall, will be able to swim up the Similkameen all the way up into the Cascades. But if that dam, and these dams, like I'm calling this the wave, this thing is called the wave. Well, that's what I'm talking about. The danger of these dams. In the spring of 1958 in Grand Forks, the Phoenix turnoff, well, that's where there was a massive spill. The tailing ponds up on Phoenix blew out. It blew down the July Creek, and it blew down, what's the creek at Fisherman Creek. Down Fisherman Creek, right down to Niagara, into the Granby River. So Granby Mining was operating then, and it was all using cyanide. So it was cyanide heap leaching. So they basically bought out the irrigation district that was taking water directly from July Creek, and I believe that one is called Covert. I'm not certain. It's not Scion, but I believe it could be Covert. So Granby Mining paid Covert to drill wells. So they went to pumps to bring up their water. So this is kind of like, these things are engineered. And a lot of these engineering projects are by people they're not ill-will. They're not saying like, oh, I don't care if in 50 years it blows away, right? But it happens, and it happens a lot. It happens a whole lot. And it's important, like I very much support the First Nations who are presently the ones opposing this expansion of the tailing ponds at Copper Mountain Mine. That's one event. I'm just walking through a couple of events to bring you to what the real event is. When these are just small things compared to what's hanging in the sky. The next one is, we all know, is there anyone here who doesn't know the Hope Slide? Who's never driven through the Hope Slide? Well, the Hope Slide happened on the day it happened, 1965, I believe it was. There were 2 earthquakes that day, in the morning. And then in the afternoon, the slide went off. There were 2 people for certain who were killed. One was driving a hay truck, a guy from Aldergrove, but his name is Starchuk. I believe it was Thomas Starchuk, and I always wonder if he was related to the Starchucks in Grand Forks. And the other one, and he was middle-aged, like he was 35, and the other one was a young woman, Mary Makatoff, I believe it was. She was from the Lower Mainland, 21. Luckily, there was a truck driver who got stopped by a mini landslide in that area, stopped his truck, started walking back towards a resort, probably around where Sunshine Village is, and stopped the bus. And the bus turned around. He convinced the driver to turn around and go and phone the services. So that was, and this is coming close to what I'm talking about tonight, this landslide. It kind of basically happens. They didn't know it was going to happen. They weren't aware it was there. It just, poof, it's there. And there was a lake. The lake, basically, 30 years, 40 years ago, driving through there, I could still notice the broken trees on the opposite side of the valley. When that rock hit the lake just shot up the other side of the valley and broke off a whole series of trees. And the last time I was through there a couple of weeks ago, I couldn't see all the broken trees. But I know 30, 40 years ago, it was quite noticeable. And so these things are things that happen, right? That are right there. One of them happened. It's the Hope Slide is an act of God, of course. And the other one, well, Mount Polley, I'm certain there were people saying Mount Polley was an act of God, but it was an act of misengineering. And it's like when it comes to money, everything gets reduced to the common denominator, which is profits. And the whole question of everything else is just in the background. It doesn't really matter. We'll deal with it when it happens. And so now I want to take you a little bit further west to the coast. Not long after Fukushima happened on March 11th. The next month, on the 21st of April, there's a book came out called Cascadia's Fault, written by a guy by the name of Jerry Thompson from Seychelles. I was really taken by that book, and I learned a lot about the coast and tidal waves and what happened to Fukushima. These things happen regularly. So you've all heard it. The big one happened on January 26, 1700. There's another big one coming. We don't know quite when, but it's due. And they've looked at sediment records on the West Coast, and they've noticed over the last 10,000 years, these tsunamis, these earthquakes, basically happen every 300 years, give or take 25, 30, 40, 50 years. But they happen regularly. And what it is, it's the Pacific plate basically jamming up against the coastal plate. The pressure builds up, it gives away. And here we're at about the Cascadia Fault is about 800 kilometers out in the ocean, gives way, water gets sucked out of the coast and then blown back in at the speed of a jet plane. Now, when I'm kind of on the coast, I'm always looking at, I'm always aware, and I recommend people read this book. It's a really good read. It's very informative, and I'm always aware of, if it were to happen like now, where's the high ground around me? Because the earthquake happens, 20 minutes later, you get the tsunami. Unless the earthquake is right in front of you, you'll get the tsunami right now. But it's usually you've got a certain amount of minutes, like in Phuket in 2004. The ocean just went out, and people went out, walking out on the sands, and they never made it back because the water got them, right? And so you have every week on every year in BC, CBC carries Earthquake Week, right? And they bring all kinds of seismologists and whatnot on the radio, and they talk about earthquakes, trying to make people aware of earthquakes. Because if you're aware of earthquakes and an earthquake happens and you're aware, you might have information that'll save your life as to how your house is built. Like, I know if there's an earthquake, my house it's gone, it's going down the hill. So already I've got it figured out which part of the house I could run to get outside. It's like that. And it's not like you're living in a stress that, oh my God, there's going to be an earthquake. There's going to be earthquakes anywhere. And BC is just like, there are fault lines all over the place. I live on adjacent to a fault line. There'd been some kind of massive earthquake where there's a big bluff behind my house. It wasn't because the ocean ate it out. It's because there was a ground collapse right next to it. And so these are facts of life. And seismologists, geologists, they all know about these things. It's like, that's what we do. That's what we look at. So now, coming back to earthquake, we have in BC on CBC regularly Joanna Wagstaff. She's she talks about weather events, she talks about all those things. And during earthquake week, she's on there every day. So maybe 5-6 years ago, and I'm kind of pretty good at getting on these talk shows at CBC, knowing to dial in before they tell you to dial in, so you're the first one to call in. Mm-hmm. So I got in on the talk show. The producer comes in, and so what would you like to talk about? What's your question? Well, my question is, and this is where we get in my topic. So I'll come back to this after, because now we're going back to the Columbia. And this is where I want to acknowledge the Shuswap people, the Kootenai, and the 12 Confederated Tribes. These are the communities I've had some contact with. But I'd also like to acknowledge all the First Nations going down into the Tri-Town area, down into Oregon, that area, where Portland, Vancouver, Washington, that whole area, the coastal people, they're all salmon people, the First Nations along the Columbia. And so here we come to this place of this great river and these great dams. It's a phenomenal thing. And there were historically 17.5 million salmon coming up every spring, salmon, like that. 17.5 million. They'd been feeding people for thousands of years. Every spring in Kettle Falls, 10,000 First Nation people would gather to fish, trade, share, prepare their food for the winter. 10,000. They'd just congregate there because it was that time of the year. In 1933, they started the work on the Grand Coulee. They basically, my parents talked about the Depression years. Both my grandfathers lost their farms to money lenders because they couldn't raise $10 a month to make the payment in the 30s. There were millions of people like that. And so you have these interests, these banking interests, that basically cut off the food supply to every First Nation above the Grand Coulee Dam. There were no more salmon from that time on. And so you can imagine what impact, what economic impact that would have had on families that were struggling. They were already struggling economically because of all the settler attitudes towards them. And then we started building dams. Dams came up in Canada. So I'm bringing you up to the Mica Dam. Any of you ever been to Mica Dam? Righto. And the Revelstoke Dam. So Mica Dam, the first time I went there was in the mid-90s. I was a tree planter, and I was amazed at how, you're out there, you're planting trees in the gravel, and how the rocks, there was so much mica. Like mica just breaks. It's very strange kind of rock. For somebody who comes from a mining town, I was just kind of like, what is this? Oh, that's why they called it Mica Dam. So then I've got an anecdote to tell you. So you're in a tree planting camp, and so there's this young guy from Rossland. Oh yeah, I'm friends with the chief engineer's family. Oh really? And tell me why I remember that. I mean, we hear stories all the time, right? So this guy tells me, the chief engineer on that thing, when they filled it, it's Kinbasket Lake is behind it. When they filled it, it moved 3 inches. He moved to the coast and he never slept. He couldn't sleep. It's a massive, massive work of mortar, right? And it's kind of like, I heard that, and I heard so many stories, and why do I remember stuff like that? And it comes back. It comes back like 25, oh yeah, that story, right? Oh yeah. But the real story here, and coming back to my question to Joanna Wagstaff is, well, Mrs. Wagstaff, when you have your Class 9 earthquake on the West Coast, what's it going to do to the Downie slide? The Downie slide? So, of course, I wasn't talking to Joanna. I was talking to the producer. Oh, please stay on the line, Mr. Pharand. We'll come back to you. They came back to me 2 times. Oh, so what are you talking about there, the Downie slide? Well, it's that big slide between the 2 dams, and what's it going to... They never ran my question, okay? So that got me much more interested in the Downie slide. The Downie slide is the biggest slide on the planet that where there's a stabilization project to stabilize the slide. Okay, so to give you a little bit of information here, the Hope slide was 45 million metric tons of overburden and rock. 45 million. Okay. Anyone familiar with the Frank slide on the way to Alberta? Okay. The Frank slide is 115 million metric tons. The Downie slide is 1.5 billion metric tons. Okay? The biggest slide that's ever happened in the United States was in May 1980. I was planting trees on the Skagit River, just south of Hope. And all we heard on the day the Mount St. Helens blew was a big boom, right? We didn't know it was an eruption. And so that was the biggest, and you can look this up. It was the biggest landslide in U.S. history. 750 million metric tons of overburden. Well, it was the caldera that disintegrated. It rolled for 30 kilometers, 15 miles, give or take. And luckily, it was in the area around a few people got killed, but it wasn't like the slides that happened in other places. And I'd like to talk a bit about like dams. Like this, this fall, last summer, in Derna, Libya, 2 dams gave way. They basically killed 10,000 people on the spot. 11,000 were missing after. And the destruction was just, I recommend you, if you're interested in the topic, to just look at some of the images, how the water, the flow is so strong and powerful that it just scours everything down to the rock. It went right down through the city like that. And then in 1975, there was a big dam failure in China, in the Henan province. I believe the reservoir was the Bangkyo reservoir, and that killed 71,000. It basically made, there were like 10 million people left homeless after. So this failure in China is in the category that we're talking about here. So you've got this massive landslide that's active. BC Hydro's got all kinds of sensors on that landslide. They know that some areas move a couple of millimeters a year, some areas move like 4 or 5 inches. They've got sensors everywhere. They've drilled like over 2 kilometers of tunnels. They're called adits. And then they go in the adits, the tunnels, and they drill long holes within the rock, within the slide, to drain it from the water. Because the slides happen on water. And if you look at, you look at reports on, geology reports, seismic reports, when they talk of the Downie slide, they always talk of a public safety issue. And I can understand why. I understand that very well. And there's more rock in the slide than there is water in Lake Revelstoke, the reservoir. In 1963, there was a similar situation in a place called Longarone, and the reservoir is called the Vajant Reservoir, which is the Vajant Dam, and this is just north of Venice. Well, it's across the bay from Venice up in the mountains. And in Longarone, they had built this dam, and they discovered there was a slide on Mount Tuck on one side of the reservoir. And they were aware of movement, and they were watching this thing. And one night, nothing happened. Nobody was alerted. One night, it went poof in the lake and over the dam. And the city of Longarone, a town of 6,000, 2,000 people just washed out. Poof, within minutes. And what happened, the shock of the water called the tidal wave jumped the dam and jumped over like 2 minor settlements. It just flew right into Longarone. 2,000 people overnight. They knew it was happening, but they didn't, it's 1963, didn't know very much about this kind of stuff because we've not been building dams for like hundreds of years, like we've been building roads. So it all went to court. And because the dam held, it was a mortar dam, it held, the judge basically classed it as an act of God. So nobody was responsible for that, right? Just God brought the mountain down. What happens here is that I've checked. I've called the safety rescue people up in Revelstoke, fire department in another town. I asked me, hey, are you, do you know about the Downie slide? One guy knew about the Downie slide. The other guy, the Downie slide, nobody knows. Some people know, like some people know about the Downie slide, but generally, nobody knows about the Downie slide. I've got all kinds of friends up and down the Columbia on both sides of the border. And I'm kind of like, I wonder, like, why am I talking about this? I shouldn't be talking about this. The BC Utilities Commission and BC Hydro should be talking about this, telling people, hey, we've got an issue here. They're not talking about this, but my plan is that they will be talking about this because it's a heck of a danger. There is nobody can, they can't predict earthquakes. They're trying to hold this mountain back. They've got sensors. We don't even know. You would think in that kind of situation that there would be at least an evacuation plan to evacuate the cities like Castlegar, Trail, Nakus, Revelstoke is, well, Revelstoke's right up top, at the top there. Nothing. Somebody knows about these things. I'm actually thinking that if you look at the commissioners on the BC Utilities Commission, if you look up their CVs, and it's all there to read, they're all business people. They're all money guys, right? None of them are like, and I'm certain they're very, very nice people, but I'm kind of under the impression they don't have the information because BC Hydro is not giving them the information. And then you go, wow, BC Hydro, what are they doing? And BC Utilities Commission, they're the guys who, they're the ones who allow, the natural gas pipelines, the dams. They're in control of all, they're the final word on projects going through in this province for anything related to energy, be it electric, gas, or whatnot. And you go like, they've got this massive problem with the Downie slide because they know it could go anytime. And they know that if it hits the river, there's going to be a tidal wave, first of all, in Revelstoke. But Mica Dam, Revelstoke is 65 kilometers from the slide. The Mica Dam is 70 kilometers. You think, oh yeah, well, 60, that's the distance between Rock Creek. Not a problem. But things are shaking here. When that thing goes, the ground is going to shake. The Revelstoke Dam is not a mortar. It's a mortar and I forget what they call it, but they fill in with rocks and then they build a mortar dam on top. Mica, I believe, is all mortar. But nevertheless, they're not too certain. The story goes when you talk to the people who live at the town. Well, there's a building site at the foot of Mica Dam. It's called Downie. I remember talking to the people there, and they're living right under this dam, and it's kind of like it's playing Russian roulette every day, right? And it's kind of like I go like, and people aren't like evil, like they don't want to. But people want to make money, right? People want to make money, and it's like when we want to make money like that, sometimes we can push these things aside. And so the slide was discovered in 1956. Mica was built in 1973. And then they were talking of Revelstoke having a dam at Revelstoke lower down at the Revelstoke Gorge. And so then the question of the slide came up. Well, can we do this? We need public consultation. So they had a public consultation of some sorts or other around 1974 in BC. And I've not gotten there yet to see what the concerns were. But I can pretty well imagine that the concerns go beyond the dam blocking the valley from the mica dam flow. There's something cooking, and lo and behold, they had this public consultation, and 1975, Revelstoke Dam project is underway. Personally, and this is what's going to happen, is that I believe we need another public consultation process these years later, because it's a serious problem. If there's no evacuation plan for these cities, there's no talk of, I'm certain when seismologists and geologists get together and talk about this, they must have like a real heck of a time, oh yeah, if she goes, this is going to happen, that's going, but nothing, we don't hear about that. We want, I think it's really important for the people who live in the Columbia to understand what the danger risk is. Is it 1 in 1,000 years? And that people decide what they can do about this, because I can tell you that rock is going to come down. I don't want it to come down, but it's going to come down. And when it does, there's high chances that it's going to take out the Revelstoke Dam. There's also a possibility that it'll rattle the mica dam so much that the mica dam is going to give too. And so, of course, this is all projection, right? But already there's a fellow by the name of Christopher Hyde. He was a reporter at CBC in the 60s, 70s. He wrote a book called The Wave, the Same. That's why I got the title, right? And in his scenario, it's kind of a political drama of fiction book about these terrorists who go and drill holes in the top of Mica Dam. They drill 6 holes, they load them with whatever explosives they have, they blow them out, and then all the dams are taken out of the Columbia River. They take out the Grand Coulee. The Grand Coulee is just like, oh my God, it's 77 million acre feet of, it's massive. Anyways, so it takes out the Grand Coulee, and then it's heading down towards Portland at 400 miles an hour. It's 500 feet high. They drop an atomic bomb at the gorge, and they, in a crack in a mountain, they stop the flood, right? But in this scenario here, and it matters that, you're getting this is the first time I talk publicly about this. You're just getting this is my very green thoughts on this. But already, some people are interested in this story, and that it needs to be addressed. Someone needs to ask the BC Utilities Commission what their safety response plan is in case of a failure of the Downie slide. Because the Downie slide failure is going to come with some other events. And that will not be a very pretty thing if it were to happen in these times or in the next 20, 30, 40 years. So we come to these things happen all the time. It's not like, we get an event like that on the planet every 20, 30 years. It's like continuous, boom, boom, boom. And when looked at astrologically, these things are like, for people who look at stars and planets, they go like, oh, the dates, you look at dates, like right now, you look at the First World War started on, Pluto was in Leo, 1 degree Leo. Right now, it's in 1 degree Aquarius right across. Pluto is all about the unknown, right? The underworld, It's like, but now it's in Aquarius. So Pluto in Aquarius, it means that Aquarius is all about air. So it's a lot about aerating things, right? And my thought is, this is a good one to spend some time on for you, Donald. Help aerate the Downie slide question. Because so many people are tied into this. People that I care for very deeply. And so we're in this time, right? There's so much going on. Like there's so much going on in our lives as individuals, as communities, and as a planet. And it matters very much that we stand up to the reductionists who want to, everything boils down, everything is brought down to that common denominator of how much money and profit can we make out of this. And there's no insurance in the world that would cover a disaster like the one we'd be looking at in the Columbia. And even, you look at the disaster we had here with the flood in 2018, the money that was poured in, it's kind of, this is not going to be run-of-the-mill for the coming events that are happening because there's so many of them. It's just mounting and mounting while we're going towards this I believe, a much more enlightened world. There are much more enlightened ways to address the issues that are troubling us everywhere on the planet than allowing the banks to call the shots. And again, I come back here. Why does the BC Utilities Commission, they oversee these things, they know, every seismologist knows that landslides are related to earthquakes. They all know it's talking to that community. 2 earthquakes in the Cascades the day that the Hope Slide happened. And last week, 13 earthquakes on the San Andreas Fault in California. 13 in one day. Oh, does that mean is that an indicator for the big one? Nobody knows. But some guys are saying, oh yeah, the big one will be up now in another week or two. Very possibly. But you have the BC Utilities Commission greenlighting all the fracking that's happening in BC is greenlighted by the BC Utilities Commission. It's common knowledge now that fracking is basically is tied into an increase in earthquakes. So one side of the mountain you got a big rock that's about to slide. On the other side of the mountain you got fracking. And in the middle you've got the BC Utilities Commission do they care about you and me? About our friends and family in the Columbia? So this is the question, right? The question, the big wave is the Downie slide. And if I have my druthers, it's like the people responsible are going to have to address the questions of what are the modalities in place to deal with a slide of that nature. Who gets to basically call the emergency? Who in whatever town is alerted? How can you alert all the people up and down the Arrow Lakes? These systems need to be in place when you're dealing with such massive structures that are basically threatening people's lives. And because I come from a mining family, I know that there are miners in those adits continually, right? And you kind of go like, they know that if it goes, they're gone. They're not going to get out. And you go like, wow. And so the price of electricity is always, it's always there. You know, what are the options? So that's pretty well my presentation. And it's like I usually, normally what I do is I'll go on the street with a petition and I'll gather, 400 or 500 names to say, okay, you can talk about this. And then I'll do meetings. And this time I said, no, I'll do it like this. And I hope you guys are okay with it, but that's my message, right? So you know about this place, and I tell you, like when I crossed the bridge at the Castlegar on my way to the Nelson, I always look upriver, wondering, like, did something happen between the time I left home and I got here? You know, it's life, and I know it's you're going to be looking upriver too when you cross that bridge, and that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm pretty good. I didn't look at my clock and I'm within 16 seconds of an hour. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
So Donald, what do you want us, why did you gather us here? What would you propose, suggest for us to do?
So where I don't know why I got this information, right? It's always like that for me, right? I've been carrying this for like 13 years. And I've gone to Canal Flats. I've tried to paddle the culvert between Canal Flats and the Kootenay River, trying to understand how the river functioned. And I don't know, Natasha. All I can do is do what I do.
I maybe said it wrong. How would you like us to support you?
Well, I mean, just allowing me, just listening to this is all I ask. I don't ask, but along the way, I have the impression like I'm looking for someone, right? It's always like that. You're looking for someone who's going to, because listen, I'm turning 80 tomorrow. Or not, 79. I'm entering my 80th year tomorrow. So it's kind of like, I'm looking at, this is kind of a, for an old guy. I'm older than Trump and I'm younger than Biden. But I just kind of figured this might be an interesting thing for me to do, right? Because to just say whatever. And I know along the way, somebody's going to really pick up on this and make it happen in a bigger way. Because I don't have that energy anymore, right? It's like, but it's important that we understand, if you have friends or family in the Columbia, talk to them about it. Tell them to go on the net and research it. The Downie slide, the Mica Dam, and you look at the BC hydro site is really interesting. Every quarter safety report, they've got diagrams on the dam. And for me, it doesn't mean anything because the people on the ground, the people living there, all the kids, the grandparents, the mothers, the fathers, the people who are having a life there are unaware of this. They just don't, they know that there are dams upriver and that could be they don't know, nobody knows about the Downie slide. We don't want people to get nervous about this, right? But what happens if that thing goes, and winter time's a better time for landslides. It's 30 below zero, okay? And there's a major storm, and you get an alert on your cell phone, evacuate. There's a tsunami coming. Yeah. Any other questions? Great.
Well, when you say the slide itself,
I'm imagining a slide that has happened, like the Hope slide. So can you explain,
Okay,
is it a partial slide that happened 1,000 years ago, or are we talking about a
okay, fair question, good question. So if you go up 60 kilometers from Revelstoke, you know, you're going up towards, you're going north, on the west side of the reservoir, there's a mountain called Mount Katz. Mount Katz has basically got different ridges going down towards the west, right? The second ridge north of the peak is called, I think it's Petit Priest, or Petit Peace. And the slide itself, it's a mountain, and I didn't mention this. It's 3,400 meters high from the lake. There's 70 meters of the slide that are underwater. Then you've got 3,400 meters going up. It's 2.5 kilometers wide at the bottom. So it's 3.4 kilometers going up, 2.5 at the bottom. And it's 30 times bigger than the Hope slide. 30 times. There's more overburden and rock in the slide than there is in the reservoir. Yeah.
And it's already slid.
And it's what's happened is that at the top of the slide there's an opening. You know, there's a specific word for it, but from the top you can actually see photos of the mountain separated. There's a crack.
So it's
it's not a crack. It's like a crevice, but there's a specific geological word for it. But it's like a crevice. It's an opening, right? And it's sliding. And they've got sensors there, and they're measuring it all the time. They're on it, but the people who are downriver don't know about it, and nobody's going to convince me that they're holding that slide back. The stabilization effort, they're saying that it increased the stability of the slide by 10%.
Question. Is it possible to preemptively partially cause the slide so that the ultimate slide will not be devastating?
So you see, that's a good question. And in my sense, these questions need to be addressed by some form of public inquiry where you would have some third party of specialists address that question. But it's definitely it's a very intelligent question to ask, right?
If I may, I actually used to work in the mining industry. From what I understand about soil mechanics, rock mechanics, it's not really feasible. You're not talking about like an avalanche with snow. It's a totally different composition. But at the same time, I have a question.
Yeah.
I used to work at the Copper Mountain.
Okay.
I used to have to actually walk that tailings dam and survey it and take piezometer readings to find the water level in it.
All right.
And every time I drive past it and see how much is growing, I get more and more concerned. But one thing that is missed is that there's a second tailings dam, a small tailings dam on the other side.
Yeah.
Is anybody looking at that one?
Yeah. Right now, I know that the Confederated Tribes of Colville and the Similkameen tribe are very concerned about the expansion. I mean, they're talking of like putting another 300 feet on top of that big tailing one. And so they're concerned about both the Similkameen and the one you're talking about, I believe might be on Wolf Creek. It's like, yeah, there is concern about anything, and they already know like a 45% failure up there is just going to bury the town. It's going to cause a lot of damage to any downstream fisheries on the Similkameen and probably the Columbia, because it comes in the Columbia or the Okanagan at Oroville. Yeah.
What do you think should be done about it?
Well, me personally, I think there should be there needs to be some kind of a public consultation process. People need to be informed about this, and there be like I said, it's very possible that the people on the BC Utilities Commission aren't even aware of it. Even on the BC Hydro Board commissioners. Maybe even at that level. What happens is you've got the money guys who control, the asset managers in these organizations. They know how to keep these things quiet. And it's all the way our world is run, right? Yeah. So I really thank you for coming, and may we be Downie slide free.
Yeah.
Thank you.